Arthur stood, and he looked in lands that he knew and knew it well. He looked and he knew the trees. He could name the trees. He breathed knowing this is his land. And he stood and he said, I will go further than I've ever gone before. And he walked until he was in lands he did not recognize. Until the dark had a new scent. And he came across a bridge. And it was a long and sturdy bridge. And he looked at the far end of the bridge and he walked. And he was so used to people moving away when he was there. But he looked at the far end of the bridge and there was something unknown to the eye. He looked at the cast of light that came to him and he saw there was a man that was 7 foot tall. He was dressed as a knight would be dressed, but he did not recognize this man. And believe me, it wasn't the size of this man that was the most recognizable. It was the color. For this knight was green. You could see green, dark olive green. As much as the tree is green, so was his skin. So was the metal. I imagine it could be his blood, could be green. And he was large. He had a green beard and green long hair. And he looked and he said, who stands before this bridge? And Arthur, who was not 7 foot tall, but he knew how to be. He said, I am King Arthur, King of the Britons. Perhaps you have heard of me. Yes, I have heard of this alleged king who thinks he owns the land. And I hear he is mighty. And with that, he pulled out his green horse and he rode on it and he said, and I, small may I be, challenge you, Arthur, to a duel. It had been years since anyone had contested Arthur. And so he was taken, and silence was his answer. But then he realized he is the king. Yes, I will challenge you, and got on his steed, and they began running, lance in hand, green lance, Arthur's lance. And Arthur was sitting on his rear. And Arthur was a king of chivalry, and he knew he had invested. And he stood up and he said, I need to know who you are. He said, I am the Green Knight. Can't you tell? I noticed. He said, Arthur, I hear that you like sport. Are you a sporting man, Arthur? Are you a sporting man? He said, I dabble, yes, I'm good at game. I can handle a bow. He said, but let's play a game. He said, I like games, that will be fine. He said, come with me, Arthur. And he took him to the glen, and he looked over and he said, well, what game shall we play? He said, oh, it's a game you shall like. It is called the beheading game. Have you played? Can't say that I have. Could you go over the rules, please? Sure. You see, this stump here. One of us lays our head on this stump, and out of nowhere, he pulled out an axe that was 3 feet tall. And for 7 feet, that's okay. And it was green as well. And he said, you get one blow, and then the other gets their turn. It's the beheading game. And Arthur, who is known for being very bright, said, I shall go first. He said, sure. And the Green Knight laid his head, and Arthur took the axe. took a moment. He said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, go ahead, Arthur. You must. It's a game. You must play the rules." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Green blood pouring forth the stump, and a head rolling off that stump. But instead of silence, that head and body returned, and he picked up his head and put it back on his body. He said, "Oh, sport, I love this. It is now my turn." And Arthur, he was a chivalrous man, and he said, "It is within the game." And he laid his head on that stump. And the knight said, "Arthur, are you ready?" Now, I don't know, but you probably would have flinched. But you're not King Arthur. And he pulled back. And he said, "Are you sure?" He said, "I believe so." And he pulled back. And he stopped just at the nape of his neck so that it just cut just a little bit. And he said, "I have another game if you wouldn't mind." He said, "Sure, anytime. Let me go on. No problem. Okay, go on." He said, "I'll tell you what. I will ask you a question. And you have a year and a day around Christmas time to come back with the answer. And if you can answer it correctly, I shall spare your life." He said, "I like this game. What is the question?" He said, "Out of all that's high and low, what does a woman want most?" Better listen to the story, children. And he said, "Out of all that's high and low, what does a woman want most? I shall have a think on that." And he got on his horse. He went back to lands he didn't know, to lands that he did know. And all King Arthur's knights were at the round table. And Arthur had a policy that no one could eat until someone could bring a story. And out of that, the big doors went up. And Arthur came in, and they were hungry, so they knew a story was coming. And he explained about the Green Knight. And he said, "I must leave for a year, my fellow knights." And the women that were around and the knights said, "Arthur, you are our king. You cannot leave for a year." He said, "I see no other way." Lancelot wasn't there. But Arthur's nephew was. And no one was looking at Arthur eye to eye. But Sir Gawain stood up. He said, "Arthur, I don't know if I'm ready to be where I am, but I will take your stead. I will proudly serve my king." And Arthur had to think for the people. And he said, "Gawain, there could be trouble." He said, "Don't worry. Now, Gawain, you need to know this. All the women in waiting were waiting for him. All the women knew of his beauty and his honesty and his courage. And so he went to every hamlet, to every village, and he would say, 'Out of all that's high and low, what does a woman want most?' And the woman would reply. She had to think for a while, because it is not an easy question. But after a long deliberation, true love. And Arthur had asked the Green Knight, 'How will I know the answer is true?' He said, 'Your heart will burn ever so bright.' And his heart burned a little bit with the answer, but didn't. And all the high and low, he went to men and said, 'What does a woman want most?' Trust. Trust. It burned ever so bright, but not bright enough. And all the high and low, what does a woman want most? Some didn't know at all. And he traveled for a year and a day, and he did not have his answer.